Less than 30 seconds. All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order. So welcome everyone this evening to our City Council workshop discussing our update. For this evening, we have Mr. Ford here to give us a presentation. Welcome, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Good evening, Bob Ford, Chief Financial Officer. So I want to spend a little time this evening talking about water rates and proposing a different strategy going forward. But first of all, let's kind of flash back to last year and talk a little bit about why did we raise our water rates in 2025. If you'll recall, the city was focused from 2018 through really right through now on the wastewater treatment plant project. So a big chunk of our focus, capital investment, et cetera, was really devoted to that project. From 2014 through 2022, the city's water rates did not change. Then in 2023, the city raised its water rates 7%, followed by another 7% increase in 24, and that coincided with rate increases that were starting to happen on the wastewater side as we were starting to prepare for construction and also for debt service on both the Series 22 debt and the upcoming SRF debt. Now, while water rates didn't change for 9 years from 2014 to 2022, the water fund's operating costs increased annually due to a number of things. One, the water fund employees grew, increase in their base compensation per employee, increase in benefit costs per employee. You remember we went from probably in 2014, we were, from a logger's perspective, we were L1, then we went to L3, then we went to L6. We enhanced and improved our 457B plan. We picked up 50% of the dependent healthcare costs, in addition to other operating costs that over this period of time would have been increasing with the cost of inflation. Therefore, by the time we got to 2024, the water fund's operating earnings were at best break even, leaving no funding for any CapEx investment. Simultaneously with that, Burns & Mac identified as part of a project they were working on $90 million in CapEx that the city needed to spend over the next 20 years. And the objective was to do all of that with cash. So the mathematics that were applied at that point in time was trying to hit all these objectives. So water rates in 25, I'm giving you a little schematic here. If we go back to 2014 through 2022, our base rate was $7.56. The surcharge per 1,000 gallons was $3.56. So the citizens of Republic saw that sort of rate structure for a 10-year period. Then in 23, we raised both the base rate and the surcharge 7%, then again 7% in 24. The action we took last year was a significant action from a rate increase perspective, and we saw the base rate go up by 94% last year, and the surcharge went up by 74%. That's where we're currently sitting today with the 25 rates, and the 26 rates are effective January 1, but because we have a timing issue with when water is used or sewer is incurred and when we actually bill and the customer pays, there's about a 95-day lag, and so the customer won't see the customer won't see the 26 rate structure on their bill until March, which is why we're having this discussion this evening, because the expectation and what was passed last year was another increase in 26 for rates, for another 45% increase on the base rate, but 109% increase on the surcharge, and then another increase in 27. Now, this bottom chart is just kind of informational. I just wanted to kind of set the stage for what kind of rate increases would be reasonable in a growing capital expenditure required kind of an environment. So I took that period of time when we didn't raise rates, and I said, what rate would we have to have put in place on an annual basis to get where we are today? A 7.5% rate increase per year on the base rate and the surcharge would have gotten us within 1 penny of where we currently are after the 95% increase that we implemented last year on the base, and would have gotten us slightly over the surcharge rate of 708, would have gotten to 789. But that kind of calibrates us as to the kind of rate structure and the kind of rate increases we should expect in a growing environment, as opposed to no rate increases at all for a period of time, and then a fairly draconian rate increase in one specific year. So the Republic citizens will see their water bills increase over 300% between 2023 and 2027. And additionally, the way we have structured our rates today, our current rate structure and our current rates actually penalize the low usage user. For instance, in 25, when we raised our base rate 94%, but we only raised our per gallon charge surcharge simultaneously by 74%. So those customers that only incur a base charge on their monthly bill, so these would be people that use 1,500 gallons or less, those folks would have seen a 95 or 94% increase in their bill on their water bill from 24 to 25. But those folks that use a significant amount of water would have paid a blended rate of both a base charge and a surcharge. So I've given you a little chart here, and I said, what would it look like if we calculated what the rate would have been, what the bill would have been for a water bill in 2014 through 2022, then again in 23 with a 7% increase, 24 with a 7% increase, and then the increases we've talked about. And I did that at different usage levels. So if you're a 500-gallon user, you went from, in 2014, you went from paying $7.56 because all you did is pay a base rate. You would have paid $7.56. But with the rate increases that we've put in place over the last few years, specifically the rate increase in 25, that 500-gallon user would be paying $16.76 today. But let's go up to the top of the chart. What if you're a 10,000-gallon user? You've seen your water bill go from, in 2022, where you were paying $37.82, you're now paying $76.94. And with the 26 increase that's currently planned, that number for that 10,000-gallon user is going to go to $150.15. And then in 27, with another 22% increase on a blended basis, it'll be at $183. So I want to spend a little time talking about the current rate structure and usage and what that means and how that impacts low users and high users. So as I said, today's current rate structure disproportionately impacts those low usage customers. Rate structures that have a low fixed base rate coupled with a per gallon charge from gallon one tend to be more fair to the low end user, as do rate structures that are tiered, where the more you use, the more you pay per incremental gallon. So in our current rate structure, the effective cost per gallon actually decreases as the customer uses more water. So this is an example here. So if I go back to this chart, and for instance, let me just let's look at 2025. If I take the 10,000 gallon user whose bill is $76.94, I divide that by the number of gallons they use, 10,000 gallons, to get a per gallon charge, and then cost affect that for everybody to say, it's kind of hard to read all the decimal points and all the zeros if we just do it per gallon. So let's do it. What is the effective cost per 1,000 gallons? So let's look at the 25 column. The 25 column says if you're a 500 gallon user, your bill, your water bill, let's go back to the prior page, your water bill of $16.76 basically says that if I divide by 500 gallons into that total and then cost affected, i.e. multiply it by 1,000, your effective cost per 1,000 gallons, if you're a 500 gallon user, is $33.52. Compared to somebody who uses 10,000 gallons, their effective cost per 1,000 gallons is $7.67. So this shows the disparity. The way our rate structure is currently configured, we disproportionately disadvantage those folks on the low side, and the folks at the high side benefit. And for instance, if you're a 500 gallon user or a 600 gallon user or an 800 gallon user, you pay the same price as if you use 1,499 gallons per month. So one of the things that our rate structure does is it disproportionately impacts those low-end users. So if we were to extrapolate out and implement the rates that we, as a council and as a staff, recommended last year, by 27, this 500 gallon user's effective cost per 1,000 gallons will be $63.52. This is just for comparative purposes, just to give you a perspective. What do the communities around us look like? And as you know, water rates and sewer rates are getting quite a bit of press these days. Ozark just raised their rates. Their water rates are going up 17.5%. So what you're seeing here are the 2025 rates. And if you look at the City of Republic's water rates compared to our peers, we are the second highest kind of across the board compared to our peers. So if you're a 10,000 gallon user, you're going to spend $76.94 based on our 25 rate structure. If you're a 500 gallon user, you're only going to pay the fixed base rate, you're going to pay $16.76. If you just look across, on the low side, Springfield's higher than us, but Ozark's lower, Nix is lower, Willard is about like us, and Stratford is lower. And the same on the high side. If you look at the high side, Stratford is the only city that'll have a water rate structure that if you use 10,000 gallons or more a month, it was in fact be more expensive than the City of Republic. Once again, just to kind of calibrate us, because the citizens of Republic, that's some of their data points. They're looking not only at how much did my bill go up or how much are my rates, but what do my rates look like compared to other communities in the general area. So this is kind of a busy chart, but there's a lot of information here. And I've divided the activity. Actually, Josh did all the work on this, so he pulled all the data for me, and then I just spread it in a format that I think is understandable. But I divided it into residential customers and commercial customers. And then I divided it into tiers, both in that residential side and the commercial side. So tier 1 is somebody that uses 0 to 1,500 gallons per month. So a base rate customer. Then those customers that use more than 1,500 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 15, etc. So if you go over to the right-hand side and you see that first section that I've circled in red, that's telling you that 91.7% of our total water customers, both residential and commercial added together, 91.7% are in fact residential customers. But the residential customers only use 67.5% of the water. And if you break it down a little further, if you look at the residential customers in that first tier, they represent 13.6% of our total customers from a water customer base. They only use 2.1% of the water. But go down to the bottom of the page, and those commercial customers that use more than 15,000 gallons a month, they only represent 2.3% of our customers. They use almost 30% of the water. So here are the nuggets, the takeaways. Residential customers represent 91.7% of the total customer base. Residential customers only use 67.5% of the total gallons, and within that residential customer area, the low users, i.e. the tier 1 users, are 13.6% of our total customers, but they only use 2.1% of the water. But they are paying a disproportionate per gallon charge when compared to the high-end user. Commercial customers, alternatively, are only 8.3% of our total customers, but they use 32% of our water. So tier 5 commercial customers, the real high-end users, they're only 2.3% of our total customer base, but they use 30% of the water. So given these larger users, whether they're residential or they're commercial users, consume a disproportionate amount of the total gallons, shouldn't they pay the same rate per gallon or potentially more per gallon than the low-end user? And then spend a little time here just talking about that water rates are only part of the story for our customers. Customers are billed for both water and wastewater usage on the same bill. So they write one check, not two. So from a lot of people's perspective, how water and wastewater play through the bill is interesting, but at the end of the day is, what does the total bill look like? So one thing I did here is I laid out water and wastewater at those 10,000, 4,000, 1,500, and 500 gallon usage, and then I layered in what the water bill would be and the wastewater would be at those different levels. And I gave you 24, which was before the fairly significant rate increase that we put in place in 25, then 25, and then the rate increase that's planned for 26. So if you look at that, let's look at the 500 gallon user. In 24, their water bill was $8.66, their wastewater bill was $26.85, so their total bill was $35.51. With the rate increase that we put in place for wastewater and water in 25, their total bill went up 36%. And what is planned for 26 will mean their bill will go from $48.44 to $61.01 for another 26% increase. And you can see how water, it's about a third of the bill, but the rate increase is greater than the rate increase on the wastewater side. So you get this blended rate. So you've got people seeing 36, 37% increases in their bill from 24 to 25. And then you see people with rate increases of 26 to almost 40% in 25 to 26. So here is we have spent, we being the administrative team as well as Josh and his team, Eric, others, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what water rates look like today. Mathematically, we achieved what we wanted to achieve. We achieved a rate structure that would generate enough money to fund a $90 million capital plan over 20 years. But I think we have maybe have done that at the unfortunate benefit or lack benefit to our customers. So we've changed our philosophy a bit here and believe that we should balance rate increases and the impact to our customers with our capital needs of the city. And by doing that, our recommendation is to flatten the slope of the water rate increase line. So, and I'd start by doing this. We're proposing to hold in 26 the 25 rates constant. So no increase in 25. And then 27 and beyond, I think we need some time to explore different methodologies and rate structures so that we come up with a rate structure that, one, does in fact have an increase every year. We should expect that. That rate increase needs to help fund a capital program and a growth in the operating expenses, and our customers should expect that. But the rate increase should be one of those things that is steady, it's predictable, it's a methodical rate increase. People can plan on it, build it into their budget as they're planning for next year and the year beyond. That rate structure needs to also treat all users equitably. So if we're going to charge for the first gallon and we're going to charge for the 20 millionth gallon, that rate should be constant across all users, and the low-end user shouldn't be paying a disproportionately higher rate per gallon than the high-end user. So flatten the slope of the water curve.
Mr. Campbell.
Apologies just for a second, just for clarification. That's no rate increase for 2026.
That is correct.
You had said 2025. There's a lot of numbers going on here, so I just wanted to make sure we...
Yeah, so we would hold the 25 rates constant through 26. But in this time frame between now and budget time, we will spend time exploring different methodologies, and we will come back to you with a rate structure that will include rate increases. It will, for 27 and beyond. But you will not see 80% increases recommended by the staff. Two, we're proposing to reduce the 10-year CIP for the water fund specifically. What we currently have planned is a $70 million capital improvement plan over the next 10 years. We're proposing to drop that to $45 million. We've done very little capital investment over the last 15 or 20 years. Matter of fact, I checked with Eric earlier today. I said, when is the last time we drilled a well and put up a tower? That was well number 6, 2006. So it's been 20 years since we actually made a significant investment. So with the Convoy of Hope Tower coming up this year, that'll be the first time in 20 years we've made that kind of investment, that kind of an infrastructure improvement to the water fund. So one, we want to balance the rate increases so that it's fair for all players. We want to reduce the 10-year CIP from 70 to 45 million. And in doing so, we have lowered our capital needs, but we've also lowered our revenue. And so we're going to need to borrow some funds to be able to execute this CIP. And our proposal is to borrow funds like we did on the wastewater side. We have 3 years to expend 85% of those bond proceeds. So we wouldn't borrow all 45 at one time. We would probably do this in maybe $15 million increments, or maybe a $30 million tranche first and then a $15 million tranche later on. But ultimately the goal would be to provide a $45 million investment plan over the next over the next 10 years, funded with debt, and that debt service funded with the rate increases that we would come back to you as part of the 27 budget. And this is an example of what we're proposing for 2026. You can see that the 25 rates at these different usage levels, 10, 4, 1,505, those water rates will remain constant. The water bill will remain constant from 25 to 26. And the only increase we will see is the planned increases on the wastewater side. So there will be an increase on people's bill in 26. It's all driven by the wastewater increases that we need to put in place, because that's the only way we can fund the debt service. So there's a lot of numbers, a lot of data, but fundamentally, we think this balances our customers' needs with the city's needs and tries to come to kind of middle ground. All of our customers should expect rate increases, but 85 and 90% increases in a year is a difficult thing for our customers to swallow. We can live within this environment. My expectation would be that in the 27 and beyond, we'll probably see years that'll have 10% increases, and then we'll see it tail off to maybe 7.5% for some years. But we're going to need to see rate increases year after year after year, because our costs go up year after year after year. So with that, I'll stop. I think that's all I had for this workshop. But it's definitely a change from what we presented last year. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Mr. Harder.
You said 27 beyond, you're looking at 7 to 10% yearly. Is that what you were saying?
Somewhere in that neighborhood. Once again, we've done a little bit of work on that time frame. We need to do more, and we really need to look at the methodology. Specifically, how are we going to have a fixed base rate of a very small amount, and then start charging from gallon one, which is kind of how Stratford does it today. It's a very simple model. It's easy to understand, and if you're a high-end user, you're paying the same price per gallon as if you're a low-end user. So that we're just looking for fairness and equity in how we build the model, and then we'll apply the rates against that. That'll help us achieve our long-term operating budget needs as well as our long-term capital needs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Do we have any additional questions from Mr. Gerke?
Mr. Ford, thanks for, I know there's a lot of effort into this. I guess, tying it all together. So you think it's fair to say this would help us so we're not kind of in this similar situation going forward? Large changes, I guess.
Well, I think that goes back to a couple of fundamental issues that we need to be diligent about. And one of those is that we need to expect a rate increase every year. And that rate increase not only needs to cover inflation and those kind of costs, but it needs to also build cash for long-term capital investments. One of the things that we don't do today that we ought to be talking about both on the water side and the capital side is funded depreciation. We're spending $150 million on a wastewater treatment plant. That plant at some point is going to wear out. And if you think about it from an effective life or a constructive life perspective, let's assume it's got a 50-year life. It doesn't work this way, but let's say we've got 50 years and it's plugging along, and in year 50 it dies, and we've got to replace it. Well, at that point in time, funded depreciation, if you take $150 million, divide it by a 50-year life, we should be putting $3 million away every year in a sinking fund so that when it dies in 50 years, we have the money to pay for it. And today we're not doing that either. So the rate structure needs to accommodate some level of funded depreciation. To give you an example, in the SRF debt requirements, they force us to put money aside in funded depreciation. It's part of their loan documentation because they know the plant's going to wear out someday. So we need to plan for that eventuality. So that's for existing assets. Then we also have the incremental assets that we need to also plan for because that's on top of what we already have. And unfortunately, we haven't done a very good job of doing that kind of planning.
Follow up to that, two things. So the CIP, that's not necessarily things we've identified that we have to do, but preparing for things that we think may come, correct?
That is correct. Now, embedded in there are things that we really need to do. But there are things within that CIP that we could push a year, push a couple of years. We can do part of it. So some of it, I wouldn't call it, I would say in general, it's ideally it would be things that in order for the city to accommodate growth, accommodate our existing citizens, existing needs, et cetera, those capital investments need to be made, but they don't have to be made exactly at that time frame. We can modify that a bit, whereas some of those requirements, we need to do it in that year. For instance, we're doing AMI, and AMI is going to be funded by both water and wastewater. We don't have any flexibility there. That needs to happen this year.
And so the other part of this, and this is a generalization, but so it'd be fair to say for the majority of the last 15 to 20 years, we did not have increases, which I think would be somewhat unusual, and we also didn't have much improvement to the current structure and facilities.
That's correct. I would say we maintained what we had, but we didn't improve what we had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerke. Do we have any additional questions from City Council? Okay. Seeing that there is none, I really appreciate staff putting all this together. As Mr. Campbell was saying earlier, this is a lot of numbers, but I really appreciate staff sticking with that and still looking on for that equitable way to address this increase to our customers and taking that time to bring that back to City Council. So I know this is a topic that's probably number one on a lot of what we hear from the citizens, and so I really appreciate having this. Does
You're
City
welcome.
Council have any other questions, concerns, comments? I believe this was our, Dan?
Moving forward, would it be effective to put a cap on the increase? I mean, is that something we can effectively do? But
I think if you put a cap on it, we'd have to also put a cap on inflation. That's not going to happen. So I think we just need to plan on rate increases. It needs to be part of our discussion every year. It needs to be part of our budget process. And once again, if we do it little by little, year after year, we won't need these big, huge, sort of draconian rate increases like we had to put in place for this year.
thank you very much. And again, thanks for all this information.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. Mr. Gerke.
Kind of, dovetailing off of that, I mean, so like going forward, I mean, we have a long-term plan, but it's something every year we're gonna have to look at. We can't control inflation. It'd be great if it went the other way too, but this will be a constant process of, multiple times a year of looking at things as things change to the positive or negative, correct?
That is correct. And as you recall, 2 years ago, we changed our CIP process. We integrated it into our budget process. And this last year, we expanded the CIP from 5 years to 10 years. So we use the budget process now to be more of a capital planning environment because it's a big chunk of what we need to do. And our two enterprise funds, water and wastewater, those are the significant investment places with regards to the city that we need to plan on, and we just need to be more demonstrative in how we put rate structures and processes in place to ensure that we have the money that we need to fund those activities.
Thank you, Mr. Gerke. Any more questions from City Council? Okay, seeing that there are none, and again, thank you to staff. Thank you to City Council for all the great questions this evening. And that was our only topic for the workshop this evening, and so I guess we'll have a little bit of a break. It's 5:33 right now, so we'll take a short break, and we're going to meet back here in the same spot for City Council. So
Yes.
thank you very much, Mr. Ford. Thank you, staff, and this workshop is adjourned.